Welcome to my video on Scenario 2 of the campaign Carnival 2022, which is being put on by Purple Druid at Wargame Culture. Today's episode, this scenario is Blockade, which involves the army, in my case, the army of Ireland fleeing from a failed battle with the forces of Ireland and attempting to escape with their supply wagons across the battlefield. They'll be moving from west to east, left to right. The forces of Ireland have sent out a small expeditionary force to intercept these troops and to delay them long enough for the main body of the army to arrive. The Ireland troops have 6 turns to get across the battlefield. I'm using the Dice Legions system in order to give Ireland a chance to get across the field. I've had to increase the movement rate of all the troops by 50% and enable troops that move only to automatically activate, because normally you'd only be able to activate about a third of your units, and in that situation there wouldn't be any way for more than a handful of units to make it across the battlefield, and all the rest would automatically be captured at the end of turn 6 when the rest of the army arrived. So those modifications I thought would be the only ones. And then I had the rather remarkable card draw for terrain surrounding the Ireland starting area with impassable hills, mountains basically. So I had to make another sort of modification. I ruled that the mountains in sectors 8 and 5 had a small pass, basically large enough to let one unit pass through. In the scale that I'm using, each die represents essentially 300 troops. So it's still a fairly wide pass to let that many pass at once. I also ruled that the units that serve as the cavalry of the Ireland units, they're Drake riders, so they're flying creatures, and so that they can, with some difficulty, fly across the mountains. They will just be able to move their movement once. In the Dice Legion system, usually an activated unit that moves can choose to move once and attack, or it can move twice. Because of the height of the mountain, I'm saying that the Drakes would be somewhat fatigued traveling over the mountain, so they can move one. They can use their movement one time. So the general battle plan here is for most of the Ireland units to get on the road, which enables 25% faster movement, and travel down the road. They're going to have a couple of units of cavalry leading. The 8-sided dice for the Ireland units are battle mages. They teleport, and so they are moving to the top of a hill near the pass to provide cover. And the group of units down toward the bottom of that west side are scouts, which are not affected by forest terrain. So they're going to move through the forest terrain and then move to the crest of the hill to join the rest of the force. They also have a range component. The Ireland units are going to move toward the pass. Their 8-sided dice are Carnage Beasts, which have both a range component and a pretty powerful melee component. And the Drake Riders will try to move across the mountain and intercept the Ireland units and delay them long enough for the rest of the force to come through the pass and attack them from behind. So that's the basic setup. On turn 1, the Ireland forces win the start of round roll-off, essentially initiative roll. Both groups are simply moving because they're too far apart to affect each other. The bulk of the Ireland force moves to the mountain pass, the hilly terrain, and leading into the pass slows them down a little bit, one Carnage Beast is able to get through the pass, and a second Carnage Beast is within the pass. The Drake Riders move up to the base of the mountain. The bulk of the Maryland force moves on the road. The mages get some pretty good teleport rolls and get to the top of the hill, and the scouts move into the woods. Turn 2 is where the rubber meets the road. In the roll-off, Ireland wins the roll-off, so they get to move first. The mages do a little adjustment in their movement on the mountaintop and then attack the Carnage Beast that made it out of the pass and do a lot of damage to it. One cavalry unit charges it and finishes it off, and a second cavalry unit charges the beast that's within the mountain pass and does some damage to it. The Drake Riders are able to move across the mountain, and the bulk of the convoy and the scouts are able to move further across the map. On turn 3, Maryland gets a little bonus to its roll-off because it lost a unit, but Ireland still wins. They move part of the convoy down the road and then move up their mages and scouts and use range attacks on the Drake Riders that have moved down to the road. They are able to destroy 2 of those units. The Maryland forces, the Rage Beast attacks the cavalry unit in the pass. The Rage Beast gets some hits on the Knights unit in the pass, but the Knights unit are able to save a couple of those hits and remain essentially in the way. The Drake Riders move up and engage the part of the convoy that hasn't gotten past them yet, doing a little bit of damage. On turn 4, Maryland is +2 on the roll-off because they lost 2 units, and they get a total of 10 with that +2, but Ireland rolls 12 on the dice and goes first yet again. They get most of the convoy that was on the road off the edge of the map. They roll a few units back to engage the remaining Maryland Drake Riders and kill one outright and damage others. The Rage Beast attacks and gets a couple of hits on the Knight in the pass, but they save both hits, so they still remain in the way. On turn 5, with a +1 from losing a unit, Maryland finally wins the roll-off. The Rage Beast in the pass attacks the Knights again and does some more damage. At this point, I probably should have retreated the remaining Drake units and forced the Ireland units to make a decision whether they want to try to engage and risk being caught on the board at the end of turn 6. But the Drake Riders stayed in the fight and got a couple of hits in, but then the remaining Ireland units finished them off, and most of the Ireland units at this point were off the board. Turn 6, Maryland is +2 on the roll-off. They win the roll-off again, but just by 1, 9-8. The Carnage Beast attacks the cavalry again and does several more hits, but the Knights manage to save a couple and essentially stay upright, slugging it out as the last of the Ireland units move off the board. And at the end of turn 6, that Knight unit is now considered captured. The victory point total, as set up by the scenario, the Ireland units got 2 points for each of the 5 wagons that they got off the board, plus 2 points for capturing the Drake leader after defeating his unit. And the Maryland forces got 2 points for capturing the Knight unit. So a score of 12-2. And that's the end of the scenario. It was a pretty simple scenario. Just one group trying to escape, using forces to screen themselves. The terrain was really a decisive factor because most of the units for the Maryland forces were bottled up and couldn't get into the fight. Part of that was also the dice roll. That turn 2 dice roll that enabled the Ireland forces to destroy the first unit that made it out and bottle up everybody else was really, really decisive. Different terrain or just a different result to that roll-off at the beginning of turn 2 might have been an entirely different game. This is a scenario that's worth replaying, definitely. I don't know when or if I'll get around to it, but it's definitely a scenario worth replaying. And that's it. Thank you for watching.